Welcome to Module 2. As I previously mentioned, this is your toughest module in this entire semester. So as you can see, learning outcomes, expectations. For this section, you're going to read 6 texts and you're going to analyze 3 websites, which create a total of 9 reader responses. There are 3 discussion posts, and then you've got 2 papers, both of which focus on the topic you've selected for your final paper, so they are at least working up towards your final paper. And then you'll have a journal for Module 2. So readings, you have 3 chapters from Ford and 3 from this Irish guy that I can't say his name. And then you've got 3 TED Talks to watch, all of which focus specifically on data. So the purpose behind this module is to better understand what kind of data is used in your major, why it's used that way, what that says about the sources you can use in your paper to make your paper meaningful to your specific academic audience, and then how to actually put all of that together. So all 9 of these sources focus on data and resources and finding resources in some way. So you'll want to read through all of those. Your 3 discussion posts focus on how you understand data and then how that's going to influence how you write and use data in your final paper. So English majors use scholarly articles as data and support. English majors also use passages from primary texts as data. Sciences use entirely different types of data. Usually primary source material is not meaningful to a biology major the way that an actual report or an experiment and the data that comes from that experiment is useful for support. So that's what we're talking about in these discussion boards, and that's what I really want you to think about and consider, so that as you write your paper for this course and then as you write all of the final papers for your major courses, you can understand how to successfully support your information. You'll then have 2 major papers. The first is a research question. This is going to be a shorter paper. What you're really getting at in your research question, your research plan, is before you start finding secondary sources for your annotated bib, what question are you actually trying to address? So this is due a couple days before the annotated bib so that I can get you guys feedback on all of your questions in your plan before you start researching so that you don't spend any time spinning your wheels. Okay, so the major paper for this section is the annotated bibliography. So in the annotated bibliography, what I'm asking you to do is to find the sources that you're going to use. Your final paper requires 15, so I want as many of those 15 as you can find for this paper. You're going to provide a brief summary of the ones that you've read. I want you to read at least half, so 7 or 8. You need a brief description of how this source will help your final argument. So not just a summary of the material, but a summary of the material and how that supports the point you're going to make in your final paper. So basically what I want you to do with this annotated bib is to tell me for each of these sources, how does this actually support what you're trying to do? And then finally, you'll also provide a brief description of why this source and this material are meaningful sources for your disciplinary audience. So if I'm from a science major, so let's say that I'm a biologist and I try to use a blog as support and they haven't done any kind of experiment on the blog, that's not very helpful support, and that's not a good source material for a paper in the biology field. Depending on the kind of paper I'm writing in English, if I'm talking about how people write about reading, then a blog is useful. If I'm talking about Catcher in the Rye, a blog is not as useful. So what I really want you to consider for each of your sources is not just how that source is going to support the point you're making, but how is that source even meaningful to the paper that you're writing. You'll want to use AP or MLA if you really love Chicago or Turabian or any of those other ones. Just send me an email. I'm pretty open to letting you guys use something besides AP and MLA if it works for your major. Otherwise, I've included the link to the Purdue OWL, which is the best way to find sources. To find the way to cite the sources that you're using both in text and in your works cited. If you have any questions or you're having trouble navigating the Purdue OWL, just send me an email, tell me the kind of source, and I will send you the direct link. And then the second part of the annotated bibliography is the disciplinary discourse paper. So what you're going to talk about here is how you see the sources that you found supporting your overall paper, what organization structure you're going to have for your overall paper, and how that reflects writing in your discipline. So now you've read sources from your discipline. I'm assuming most of you guys are at least juniors, so you've read a lot of papers, a lot of projects, a lot of books within your discipline. So what I want you to do in the discipline discourse is to consider, how do these sources fit in the broader scheme of things, and how does that influence how I'm going to structure a paper? So in the sciences, what this really means is your disciplinary discourse focus. When you organize a paper, you usually do discussion, which is all of the background information, focusing specifically on the background information that supports the point you're trying to make, and then you move into the methodology section, and then you have the results section, and then you have the discussion section. So those 4 sections are very standard for a biology-related article. So how does that structure, if that's the structure you're using from papers, influence how you'll organize your paper? Will you put certain types of methodological papers together in your paper to develop your issue the way that you want to develop it? From an English perspective, a lot of our papers focus on, here's all of the information, here's where I'm coming from, here are the definitions that you need to know to understand my paper, and then the issue is developed. So will you lean more heavily towards definition papers at the beginning of your particular paper, and then more issue and topic related towards the end? So how does your discipline organize writing, and then how is that going to influence you? Finally, you'll have your self-reflection journal, and all of the questions that you need to answer are here. So as I mentioned, this is the toughest. You've got 9 reader responses you have to do. You have 6 articles that you need to read, 3 media that you'll need to analyze, and then 2 papers that you'll need to write. Send me an email if you have any questions. Make sure that your papers focus on the issue that you proposed in your issue proposal in Module 1, and this is the issue that you will continue to discuss for the remainder of the semester. If you have any questions, send me an email. Otherwise, good luck, and it all gets easier after this module.